The potential to transform suburban densities and address social and sustainability issues through intergenerational households, through telecommuting and car sharing. So I'll pass it off to Saad.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just really fortunate to be here following such a great roster of people working in the city. And you'll see a big interconnection of the themes that all the folks have been working on and inspiring the rest of us. I'm here to talk about Tiny Toronto, and we might have heard a lot about affordable housing being talked about a lot. And we've kind of shifted our focus away from it, because it almost seems like a pipe dream to have an affordable house in the city that went up the highest in property values in 1 year. So being in that outlier, we started talking about attainable housing. Because we're in a situation right now where the middle segment is experiencing house prices that are going up at a scale that has no relation to their income or their whereabouts. The house sizes are going up, the prices are going up, and how close you live to each other is also increasing. So you're losing a lot of the land space around you. And the thought of ever owning anything on land is just a dream now, or the next generation that's graduating out of school and getting into the workforce. I can bring my focus onto this map. The reason I'm bringing this one is to So this map, I want to highlight how we're located right here in the pre-war area, number one. And this is about suburban or single detached to near 25% of downtown Toronto. When you step out to Etobicoke, it's about 35%, and North York is about 45%. And interestingly enough, Scarborough is about 50%. So Scarborough is the most suburban quarter within the city of Toronto. And when you step out into York region, it's about 80%, so that has a lot more similarities. Durham is 90%, and Peel 70%. So what I'm going to be talking about relates more to these invisible cities that get, when these people travel outside of Toronto, they say they're from Toronto, but they're from the periphery of Toronto. And the dynamic, the way the city's laid out, has set us on a path where we're either waiting a really long time for an affordable housing unit, multiple years or decades is a norm. And while you're waiting, you're compromising your life in some substandard living that doesn't really get inspected or enforced by city standard or has been grandfathered in. And we have so many stresses on housing that substandard housing has become a norm. So how people are reacting is that they take a part-time job of commuting an hour or two outside the city, and they spend half a part-time job basically moving their body from where they need to work to where there's desirable for them to live. And this is because of circumstances, not out of choice. And part of the next map is to show why are we in this quandary. This map shows the building construction in Toronto. And if you see the red and yellow in the middle area, this is the century-old part of Toronto. The amazing part is that people want, 90% of the people in Toronto have a desire for a new dwelling, but 90% of old Toronto is old. So it is the greatest mismatch in history of demand and supply of what's required. And what you see built around you, these condos, are the perfect compromise. They're new, they can go up vertically, and it fits in the mortgage model. So that's why we've ended up in this situation. And the second highlight is that blue rim that wraps around. And why I want to highlight that is that this is the half-century-old part of the city. So it's half the age of the whole city. And in this area, you have large suburban lots that are really wide and deep. And they have a different build type. So basically 70% of the city does not look like the old Toronto area. It looks like the rest of Canada and 2/3 of North America, which is suburban. Here's a picture out of an exceptionally detailed paper that's going to be released really shortly that takes into consideration what no planned and paid planner is considering. This is a generation that's locked out of housing, and they're thinking about how this backyard dwellings can create a huge solution. And whenever we talk about laneway housing in downtown, we have fire access challenges, what's going to happen to get the paramedics in there. They're coming out with like motorcycles that will extinguish your fire, and like all these things you quote in Japan and Tokyo. But few people realize when you quote Tokyo, the city of Tokyo has more people than the country of Canada. So it has no relevance. And we really have to think from where we are, and we are a suburban city. All that we plan to do is for the exception, which is the downtown area. And there's no planning effort spent on the majority of the built form, which is suburban. And this is an amazing start to it that goes into the detail of setbacks, zoning, site planning, accessibility, lighting, how the pure courtyard would work, and so forth. This is a spectrum of options that we've created here for Tiny Toronto. This includes the 100 square foot permit-free unit, which is a very popular laneway house that's being considered. Now, the laneway house ideally would be about 3 stories tall to accommodate a 900 square foot unit. This is something that's really well thought out by Muji Japan, which is sometimes referred to as the IKEA of Japan. And they make 7,000 household products, and they built you a house that will fit in your garage footplate. And they're looking at North American backyards better than any North American is. And in the middle, you'll see the 3 different options that are very viable for a suburban backyard. You can have a single-story, 400 square foot unit for somebody that wants to avoid steps and make it fully accessible. You can have a 1.5-story cottage that can allow a couple to start the life. Or you can have a 2-story, 800 square foot coach house that can accommodate a small family fully in the backyard. Now there's 2 main companies that are in my attention focusing on this space. There's the Bunkie that's creating a permit-free unit to go into a farm space. And there's Lanescape that's focusing on the laneways in downtown and how they could be converted into housing. They've done an amazing job over the last 2 years of engaging the city, doing a whole lot of consultation, and setting a precedent that was brought over from other cities. That this can only succeed when you set the precedent that there's no severance of the lot and ultimate change of the neighborhood. Because a lot of laneway houses done elsewhere, there's always a conversation of severing the lot and selling it separately, and then the neighbors are resistant to that idea. And Lanescape has done a great job of making that the premise for starting the conversation. And ourselves, we really focus in the middle. Just like we focus in the middle part of the city, we really focus on the middle size of the housing as well. Now this gives you a detailed map that was done by Oscar Renamal. He's a spatial analyst. And the green lots highlight spaces that are about 1/10 of an acre or larger. So they're greater than 4,000 square feet. So there's a tremendous amount of space in the city that can actually accommodate these 3 types of dwellings, between a garden suite and a backyard house and a cottage house. And as you can see, the older part of the city doesn't have as much space to accommodate these larger units. There's many parts that are darker, which are 150-year-old parts of the city. And here's some costing on them, on what they could cost, what they could rent for. But the highlight here is the greatest opportunity lies in the middle, where there are 100,000 backyards. And to consider this, that there's 1 million households in Toronto, I just want people to consider what would happen if there's a 10% supply increase to detached housing stock in the city of Toronto. Does this have any relevance to the issue that we face today that the 3 levels of government are trying to solve? And they're just trying to join the party and figure out a way to tax and get some revenue on their books. So this is a real solution that nobody's really considered. And by the way, the laneway houses being listed at 37,000 has to be corrected, because when you consider 3 or 4 different widths of laneways, the potential of laneways is actually 10 or 12,000. So when we're considering just laneway housing as adding stock, we're missing 90% of the potential. And the real story is, how do you replace a neighborhood without displacing the residents in their turn? This housing typology allows the previous homeowners to potentially build a unit, rent it out, or move into the backyard and rent the main house out as their pension. And there's a security of having a guaranteed income and a social connection and not being removed from your environment that you're familiar with. Here's a touch on the basic problem that was in the suburb was parking. And Kelsey did a rendition on how the car-to-go could come on the front areas of the city lots. And the province of Ontario is actually doing free electric car charging right now to encourage people to adopt this. And this is something from Car2Go, how they've displaced so many cars on the road. So this talks about removing cars from the source of origination from the suburbs. Here's an old map of the fiber network, and this really ties into the telecommuting. So maybe people are traveling 4 days a week and telecommuting 1 day a week, but when you have 1,000 megabyte fiber internet installed in your backyard with a private office space, you might telecommute 4 days a week and travel once. And the time you spend commuting will probably be enough to work and converse with people online. And this is just a map of Toronto showing the population. I just wanted to remind the 2.7 million, the 2 actually comes from the 70% of the city that doesn't really get identified with Toronto. It's the invisible suburbs. Like Scarborough actually houses more people than the city of Vancouver. North York houses more people than Winnipeg. And Etobicoke houses more people than Halifax. And just name the 3 largest cities in eastern, western, and central Canada. And that are the 2 million invisible density that we're not planning for. And this is a bit on how this electric car sharing that Rob was talking about is really going to propel the change. It won't be coming from planning departments, it'll be coming from private enterprises they'll decide what your city looks like. This is a case competition we had on the planning issues, and 20 students were in their early 20s, very enthusiastically came up with solutions that could solve with their phones. And that's how they like to be consulted, not in public consultations. Here's a glimpse of a short team that was at a moment in time, but there's been about 24 people who have contributed greatly to this, and there's a whole lot more coming. And this is an image of one of the spacious backyards in the suburbs. And this is about 30 years old. It's going to be 30 years old this year. And a curious walk could be on Craven Road, that is the original tiny town of Toronto, for people to experience what this size and format could be. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sid. And I think that's a really important note as well, that a lot of today has been thinking about downtowns, I think, when we think about cities. And so recognizing that our cities are actually, don't look a lot like what this sort of morning discussion might suggest, and that it is, our cities are actually quite suburban in many ways. I think that's a really important point, so thank you for bringing that to the floor. So we're going to throw it out to questions now. We've got a microphone that's going to go around the floor, so I'll throw it out to you guys. Let's get questions.
This question is for Sid, and I really applaud the idea of tiny homes. I'm just a little concerned. I live on Brewer Street, right behind it is a coach house that was on sale a couple of years ago. And it's about 19 by 20 feet, and it's got a gable roof, so the second floor is a lot smaller, and it went for $469. But in March it went up on sale again, so I wanted to take a look. $799. So yes, tiny homes, but how is it accessible to? How do we prevent even having the large inventory that you suggest from having it as an investment? And I mean, whoever sold it, whoever bought it for $469 really made a big investment when they sold it for $799.
That has more to do with anything that has land attached to it is what appreciates. It's not the house that appreciated in Toronto. The speculation going on in Toronto is people are buying houses without looking inside because they're not intending on living in them. And that's pricing land at an international scale. Toronto's inaffordability matches Sydney and Vancouver, and it just equalized with it. And they're driven by foreign investment. So the dynamic that you see at that intersection that you're talking about has very little to do with local Canada. And you might find that that this dynamic is only going to propel itself. So I don't talk about affordable housing because that's just a pipe dream that doesn't have a basis in reality and where you live. If you're living in one of the most desirable cities in the world, this is a global destination. And I don't see the price dropping anytime soon. What I do see is if you have a tremendous supply increase like they did in Sydney, Australia, you can actually make the condo rents come down because you have an option of renting a granny flat for $1,600 versus renting a condo for $2,000 or $2,100. So the ever-increasing rental rates for condos that kept going up and driving the pressure eased off because you have housing diversity. So it's creating diversity in the spectrum, but it's not solving the problem that you addressed.
You have another question?
Yes, my question's for Anand. I'm a professor of city